The mining ship floated silent in the darkness between two distant stars, while Jake Miller worked alone in the engine room, checking systems that had been running perfectly for 3 months straight, but still needed daily inspection according to company rules that nobody really followed except him. He was 25 years old and had been in space for only 1 year, which made him the newest member of the crew who still got excited about seeing nebulas through the windows while everyone else just complained about the food and counted days until shore leave. The ship was carrying rare minerals back to Earth from the outer colonies where humans had been mining for 50 years, ever since first contact with the Galactic Council who sold them the technology, but always seemed surprised that humans actually survived in such dangerous places. Jake heard footsteps in the corridor outside, which was strange, because this section was supposed to be empty during the night shift, so he grabbed his scanner and went to investigate, hoping it was just someone lost or maybe looking for spare parts. What he found made him drop the scanner with a loud clang that echoed through the metal hallways, because standing there was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, with pointed ears and silver hair that seemed to glow in the dim emergency lighting. She was tall, maybe 6 feet, with skin that looked like moonlight, and wore a flowing dress that seemed completely wrong for a mining ship but somehow perfect on her, while 3 small creatures floated around her head like living jewels. The creatures were dragons, no bigger than his hand, each one a different color, with the blue one having wings like glass, the red one scales like rubies, and the green one eyes that sparkled like emeralds, all making soft musical sounds. Jake tried to speak, but his mouth was dry and his brain seemed to have forgotten how words worked, while she watched him with eyes that were purple like deep space nebulas and held wisdom that made him feel like a child. She smiled and said in a voice like singing that her name was Luna, and she had been waiting for him specifically, which made no sense because he was nobody special, just another engineer on a ship full of them. The dragons flew down to inspect him, with the blue one landing on his shoulder and sniffing his neck, while the red one circled his head examining him, and the green one perched on his tool belt, making happy chirping noises. Luna walked closer, and Jake noticed she moved like water flowing without sound, and when she was near enough he could smell something like flowers mixed with ozone, the way air smells after lightning strikes during earth storms. She said she had come aboard at the last station using diplomatic papers from her father, who was an important elf in the Galactic Council, and had been searching the ship for 3 days, looking for the right human. Jake asked what she meant by the right human, because he was sure she had the wrong person, since he was just a junior engineer who had never done anything important or brave in his entire life. Luna laughed, and it sounded like bells ringing, while her dragons mimicked the sound, creating a harmony that made the metal walls vibrate, and she said that was exactly why she needed him, because he had potential that was still untapped. She explained that her people had been watching humans for decades, trying to understand how such a young species had spread across the galaxy faster than races that had been traveling space for thousands of years. The blue dragon flew to her shoulder and whispered something in her ear with sounds like wind chimes, and she nodded before saying that humans had something special that other races had lost, which was the ability to face danger with joy. Jake wanted to argue that he had never faced danger with joy, and actually went out of his way to avoid danger whenever possible. But something about the way she looked at him made him want to be the person she seemed to think he was. Luna touched his hand and he felt electricity run up his arm, not painful but energizing, like drinking too much coffee, while her dragons hummed in harmony, creating a sound that made his bones vibrate in a pleasant way. She said her father had sent her to find a human to help with a mission that required someone who could be brave when necessary, but also smart enough to know when not to fight, which was a rare combination. Jake asked what kind of mission, while trying to ignore how her hand felt on his, or how the dragons were now all sitting on him, like he was furniture they had claimed, and seemed to be purring like cats made of scales. Luna looked serious for the first time and said there was something hunting ships in this sector, something that came from the void between galaxies and ate energy, leaving only frozen metal and dead silence behind. The company had not told the crew about the danger, because they did not want panic, but 3 ships had already disappeared, and hers father's people believed only humans had the right kind of crazy bravery to face it. Jake felt fear cold in his stomach, but also something else, something that might have been excitement, because for the first time in his life someone was asking him to be more than just the quiet engineer who followed all the rules. Luna must have seen something in his face because she smiled again, and her dragons made sounds like laughter while she said she knew he would help because humans always did the unexpected when given the chance. She pulled out a crystal from her dress that glowed with inner light and held it out to him, saying this would protect him if he agreed to help. But once he took it, there would be no going back to his old safe life. Jake looked at the crystal, then at her, and realized this was the moment that would define who he was going to be for the rest of his life. Either the careful engineer or something more reached out and grabbed the crystal without hesitation, feeling it burn cold against his palm while Luna smiled, and her dragon sang a victory song that echoed through the ship. The moment he touched it, visions flooded his mind of battles between stars, of creatures made of shadow and hunger, of humans standing against impossible odds with nothing but determination and whatever weapons they could find. Luna said, "Now, you begin to understand, human, why my people believe yours will inherit the galaxy, not through conquest but through sheer refusal to give up when any reasonable species would run." Jake felt the crystal merge with his skin, becoming a mark that glowed faintly blue, while the dragons flew around him in celebration, and he knew his life on the mining ship was over. Luna took his hand again and said they needed to go to the bridge because the danger was coming sooner than expected, and the crew would need warning, even if they did not believe it at first, as they walked through the corridors with the dragons flying ahead like scouts. Jake felt different, like something sleeping inside him had finally woken up and was ready to face whatever came next. They reached the bridge, where Captain Ashley Coleman was drinking coffee and reviewing reports, looking bored until she saw Luna and the dragons, then dropped her mug with a crash. Luna stepped forward and spoke in a voice that carried authority, despite her young appearance, saying the ship was in danger and everyone needed to prepare for battle in less than 1 hour. The captain started to argue but stopped when Luna showed her a hologram from the crystal depicting the creatures that were coming. Massive things of living darkness with teeth like black holes. Jake watched the crew panic, then slowly pull themselves together as Luna gave orders with the confidence of someone who had done this before. While her dragons grew larger and more dangerous looking, he realized this was what humans did best, taking impossible situations and finding ways to survive them, not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Luna looked at him and said, "This is why I chose you, Jake Miller, because when the moment came, you grabbed the crystal without hesitation. Just like your ancestors grabbed fire from the gods, the proximity alarm started screaming, and through the windows they could see space itself rippling like water as something huge and hungry approached the mining ship from the void." Luna handed him a weapon made of the same crystal as his mark and said, "Remember, human courage is not the absence of fear but action despite it." And her dragons roared agreement as battle approached. The creature that emerged from the void was nothing like the holograms had shown, because those were just shadows of the real horror that now pressed against the ship, making the hull groan and metal twist, while everyone on the bridge stood frozen. It had no real shape, just darkness that moved like liquid, with pieces that looked like teeth or claws or eyes appearing and disappearing, while it wrapped around the mining ship like a hungry snake made of nightmares and emptiness. Captain Coleman was shouting orders, but her voice sounded small against the sound the thing made, which was not really a sound but more like silence. So loud it hurt, while the lights flickered and died, leaving only emergency power. Luna stood calm in the chaos, with her dragons, now the size of large dogs, glowing with internal fire that pushed back the darkness creeping through the walls like the creature was trying to seep inside through every crack and seal. Jake felt the crystal weapon in his hand pulse with warmth and realized he could see through the darkness better than the others, like the mark on his palm was showing him where to aim and when to fire. The creature struck the ship hard enough to throw everyone to the floor except Luna, who floated slightly above the deck, and Jake, who found himself moving with impossible balance as if the crystal was keeping him stable. Luna shouted for everyone to get to the center of the ship where the shields were strongest, while she and Jake would buy them time, and her dragons flew ahead breathing fire that actually hurt the darkness, making it pull back. They ran through corridors that were bending and twisting as the creature tried to crush the ship, while Jake fired his crystal weapon at shadows that reached for them with hunger that felt older than stars. The blue dragon flew beside him, freezing tentacles of darkness that burst through the walls, while the red dragon melted them and the green dragon created barriers of light that held for precious seconds before shattering. Luna moved like she was dancing, using her crystal sword to cut through the darkness, while singing in a language Jake did not know, but somehow understood, was keeping the creature from fully entering their dimension. They reached the cargo bay where the creature had torn a hole in the hull, but instead of air rushing out, there was just more darkness pouring in like oil that moved with purpose and intelligence. Jake remembered something from his engineering training about how energy moves in predictable patterns and realized the creature was following the power lines of the ship, feeding on electricity and heat. He told Luna they needed to shut down everything except life support to starve it, and she smiled like he had just discovered something important while her dragons chirped approval. They fought their way to the main power control, where Jake started shutting down systems, while Luna and her dragons held off tendrils of darkness that kept trying to stop him. The ship went dark except for the glow from Luna and her dragons and the crystal weapons, and suddenly the creature seemed less solid, like it was having trouble maintaining its form without energy to feed. Luna said now was their chance and grabbed Jake, pulling him toward the hole in the cargo bay where the creature was thinnest, and he realized she meant to go outside to fight it directly. Before he could object, she had wrapped them both in a bubble of light from her crystal, and they were floating in space surrounded by the creature, while the dragons grew even larger until they were the size of small ships in the vacuum. Jake should have been terrified, but the crystal kept him alive and warm while Luna pointed at the creature's core, which was visible now as a knot of absolute darkness that hurt to look at. She said they needed to hit it together with everything they had because this was the only chance before it adapted. And Jake nodded because what else could he do when an elf princess asked him to help save everyone? They raised their weapons and the dragons gathered around them, building up fire and ice and light, while the creature realized the danger and pulled all of itself back from the ship to focus on them. Jake felt power flow through him from the crystal mark on his palm, up through his arm, and into the weapon, while Luna sang that strange song louder, and the dragons roared in harmony. The creature struck at them with everything. It had tentacles of void that tried to erase them from existence, but the bubble of light held, while cracks spread across it like breaking glass. Luna looked at Jake and said, "Now, human, show me that legendary bravery," and he did not think, just acted, pouring everything he had into one shot while screaming a war cry he did not know he had. Their weapons fired together, creating a beam of pure light that hit the creature's core at the same moment. The dragons breathed their combined elements, creating a storm of fire and ice and energy. The creature screamed without sound and began to collapse in on itself like a black hole running in reverse, while Luna grabbed Jake and pulled him back toward the ship as fast as she could fly. They crashed through the emergency field covering the hull breach and rolled across the cargo bay floor, while outside the creature imploded into nothing, leaving only normal space behind. Jake lay on the cold metal, breathing hard, while Luna laughed and her dragons, who had shrunk back to their small size, danced around them singing victory songs that sounded like pure joy. The lights came back on and crew members started arriving, led by Captain Coleman, who looked at the hole in her ship, then at Luna and Jake covered in frost and glowing residue from their weapons. Luna stood and helped Jake up while saying the danger had passed for now, but more would come, because the void between galaxies was full of such creatures drawn to life and energy like moths to flame. Captain Coleman asked who would pay for her ship repairs, and Luna pulled out a credit chip worth more than the ship itself, saying her father would be grateful the crew had helped test his theory. Jake asked what theory, and Luna smiled, saying that humans were the only species crazy enough to follow an elf princess into space to fight nightmare creatures with nothing but crystals and determination. The crew started cheering and slapping Jake on the back, calling him a hero while he tried to explain he had just done what needed doing, but nobody wanted to hear his modesty. Luna pulled him aside and said this was just the beginning, because her father would want to meet him now that he had proven himself, and the dragons seemed to agree, making happy sounds. Jake asked if her father would approve of a human helping his daughter, and Luna laughed, saying her father had been watching the whole time through the crystals and was probably impressed. She showed him a hologram from her crystal of an older elf with a crown of stars who was smiling and nodding, while behind him stood dozens of other elves, all watching with interest. Jake realized he had been tested and somehow passed, though he still did not understand what the test had been, for or why they had chosen him, of all the humans they could have picked. Luna said it was because he had the right combination of intelligence and instinct, calculating when to shut down the power, but not hesitating when action was needed, which was rarer than he knew. The dragons flew to him and perched on his shoulders while Luna said they had chosen him as their friend, which meant he would always have their protection and could call on them when needed. Captain Coleman announced they were heading to the nearest station for repairs and everyone should get back to work, while giving Jake a look that said they would talk later about his new friends. Luna said she needed to report to her father, but would return soon, and Jake felt disappointed until she kissed his cheek and whispered that their adventure was just beginning. As she walked away with her dragons flying around her, Jake touched the spot where she had kissed him and felt the crystal mark on his palm pulse with warmth. He went back to the engine room to start repairs, but everything felt different now. Like the universe had become bigger and more dangerous, but also more exciting than he had ever imagined. Other crew members kept coming by to ask about the fight and the elf princess and her dragons while Jake tried to work, but could not stop thinking about what Luna had said. That night, he stood at his window looking at the stars and wondering what other creatures lurked in the void, and whether he was really brave enough to face them. The crystal mark glowed softly and he heard Luna's voice in his mind saying, "Courage grows with practice, human, and you have taken your first step on a very long journey." He smiled and went back to his repairs because tomorrow they would reach the station and he had a feeling Luna would be waiting with another adventure. The space station was bigger than any city Jake had seen on Earth, with levels that went up and down for miles while ships from 100 different species docked and departed every minute. Luna was waiting at the docking port with her dragons, but she looked different, wearing armor that seemed to be made of starlight, while her creatures had grown to medium size and looked ready for war. She smiled when she saw him, but her eyes were serious as she said her father had summoned them immediately, because the creature they killed was just a scout, and more were coming. Jake had barely slept thinking about this possibility, and now his fears were confirmed, while Luna led him through crowds of aliens who all stepped aside when they saw her dragons. They took a transport tube to the diplomatic section where the walls were made of crystal that showed the stars outside, and guards stood at every corner wearing armor similar to Luna. The guards saluted Luna and stared at Jake with curiosity as they passed through multiple security checkpoints until they reached doors that were 30 feet tall, covered in symbols that hurt to look at. Luna touched the doors and they opened silently, revealing a chamber that seemed bigger on the inside than should be possible, with a ceiling that showed galaxies spinning slowly. At the far end sat her father on a throne made of what looked like frozen light, while around him stood dozens of elves all watching Jake with expressions that ranged from curiosity to suspicion. The Elf King was ancient in a way that Jake could feel in his bones, with eyes that had seen stars born and die, while his presence made the air feel heavy with power. Luna bowed, and Jake copied her while the dragons flew to perches that seemed designed for them, and the king studied Jake for a long moment before speaking. His voice was like distant thunder as he said, "So, this is the human who destroyed a Void Seeker with his first attempt, which is something our warriors train for, centuries to accomplish." Jake started to say it was mostly Luna, but she touched his arm to silence him, while her father stood and walked down from his throne, moving like flowing water. Up close, the king was even more intimidating, standing 8 feet tall with a crown that seemed to be made of actual stars that moved and twinkled, while his robes shifted through colors that had no names. He circled Jake while speaking about how his people had watched humanity spread across the galaxy in mere decades, accomplishing what took others millennia, and always wondered what drove them. The king stopped in front of Jake and said his daughter believed humans possessed something unique, which was the ability to weaponize their ignorance, turning not knowing into not caring about impossible odds. Jake was not sure if that was an insult or compliment, but Luna smiled encouragingly, while her dragons made soft sounds that might have been laughter from their perches. The king continued saying, the Void Seekers were growing bolder, hunting in packs now and taking entire systems, while the older races debated and planned but never acted. He showed them a hologram of the galaxy with dark spots spreading like infection, and said at this rate, half the civilized worlds would be gone within 50 years. Jake studied the map and noticed the Void Seekers were avoiding certain areas and asked why they did not attack the core worlds where the oldest races lived. The king looked surprised. Then, pleased as he explained those worlds were protected by ancient weapons that the Void Seekers had learned to avoid, but those weapons could not be moved. Luna added, that was why they needed mobile defenders who could go where the weapons could not reach and fight the creatures before they consumed younger colonies. Jake began to understand why they needed humans who were crazy enough to fly into danger rather than wait for it to come to them like most species preferred. The king said he was forming a special force of warriors from different races but needed human leadership, because only they had the right mindset for offensive warfare against the Void. Jake wanted to say he was just an engineer, not a warrior, but looking at Luna and remembering how it felt to fight beside her made him consider the possibility. One of the other elves stepped forward, a woman with silver armor who looked like an older version of Luna, and said humans were too chaotic to lead anything. The king raised his hand for silence and said that was exactly why they needed human leadership, because chaos was the only thing the Void Seekers could not predict or adapt to. He turned to Jake and offered him a commission as captain in the new force, with Luna as his advisor and her dragons as his personal guard if he accepted. Jake looked at Luna, who was trying to keep her expression neutral, but he could see hope in her eyes while her dragons watched him intently from their perches. He thought about his safe job on the mining ship and his small room on Earth where nothing ever happened, and nobody expected anything from him except fixing broken machines. Then he thought about how it felt to fight the Void Seeker with Luna beside him and how alive he had been in that moment when death was seconds away. Jake straightened and said he would accept if he could choose his own human crew members, because he knew others who were crazy enough to fight monsters from outside reality. The king smiled, which was terrifying and beautiful at once, and said of course because humans always worked better in groups where they could encourage each other. Stupidity. Luna laughed and her dragons sang while the other elves looked scandalized. But Jake was starting to understand the king had a sense of humor under all that ancient power. The king waved his hand and Jake felt something change, like reality had acknowledged his new position, while the crystal mark on his palm evolved into something more. Complex Luna showed him his new rank insignia, which appeared on his clothes as a badge made of the same crystal, and said he was now officially Captain Miller of the Void Guard. The other elves bowed slightly, which seemed to pain some of them, while Luna dragons flew down to perch on Jake again, claiming him publicly as their chosen human. The king dismissed them, but asked Luna to stay, and as Jake left, he heard the king say something about being careful with humans because they were more dangerous than Void Seekers. Jake was given quarters on the station that were bigger than any apartment he had lived in, with windows showing the stars and a communication system to contact Earth. He called his friend Maria Santos, who was a pilot known for taking insane risks, and told her about the opportunity, while she laughed and said she was already packing. Next, he contacted Roger Kim, an weapons specialist, who had been discharged for being too aggressive, and who immediately asked how many aliens he could shoot. Within hours, Jake had assembled a team of 12 humans who were all considered slightly unhinged by Earth standards, but perfect for fighting nightmare creatures. Luna visited that evening with her dragons and seemed impressed by his choices, saying her father had expected him to pick safer options, but he had chosen warriors. Jake said they were not warriors, just humans who did not know when to quit. And Luna said that was the same thing from her perspective. She sat beside him on the couch while her dragons explored his quarters and told him about the training they would undergo and the weapons they would receive. The crystals were alive in a way she explained, bonded to their users and growing stronger with each battle. But they chose their partners and not everyone could use them. Jake asked if the other humans would be accepted, and Luna said the crystals would know who had the right spirit, and those who did not would be sent home. She moved closer, and Jake could smell that flower and ozone scent while her dragons curled up around them like cats, creating a warm circle of scales. And gentle fire, Luna said her father was testing him by throwing him into leadership immediately, but she believed he would succeed because humans always did when the stakes were highest. Jake admitted he was terrified of failing and getting people killed, but Luna said that fear would keep him careful while his human nature would keep him brave. She stayed until late, talking about the battles ahead and the worlds they would visit while her dragons dozed and occasionally puffed small smoke rings. When she left, she kissed him again, this time on the lips, and said, "Tomorrow the real work begins. But tonight he should rest because he would need his strength." Jake lay in his bed looking at the crystal mark on his palm that now showed a complex pattern like a star map, and wondered what he had gotten himself into. But when he thought about Luna and her dragons and the chance to do something that mattered, he felt that same fire in his chest that had made him grab the crystal. Tomorrow, his team would arrive and training would begin. But tonight, he was Captain Jake Miller of the Void Guard, and that was enough to make him smile. The training hall was massive with gravity that could be adjusted and obstacles that appeared from nowhere, while weapons lined the walls from primitive swords to plasma cannons. Jake watched his human team arrive one by one, with Maria Santos landing her ship by doing 3 unnecessary barrel rolls while Roger Kim brought enough personal weapons to arm a small army. The others came from different backgrounds, including Amy Chen, a medic who had saved a whole colony from plague, and Tyler Washington, an engineer who built impossible things. Luna introduced them to the crystals which sat on pedestals glowing softly, and told them to approach slowly and let the crystals choose them, not the other way around. Maria went first with her usual confidence, and a crystal immediately flew to her, turning orange like fire while she laughed and said it felt like drinking rocket fuel. Roger approached carefully and a crystal turned deep red, bonding with him while he grinned and said he could feel every weapon in the room calling to him. Not everyone succeeded, as 2 of the 12 were rejected by the crystals and had to leave, but the remaining 10 all bonded, including Amy, whose crystal turned white, and Tyler, whose turned yellow. Luna explained that each crystal gave different abilities, with some enhancing strength, while others improved speed or perception. But all of them made the user harder to kill. The elf trainers arrived next, and they were not happy about teaching humans with one, saying loudly that giving humans advanced weapons was like giving fire to children. Jake was about to respond when Maria threw a training knife that stopped an inch from the complaining elf face while she smiled and said humans had been playing with fire for millennia. The elf trainer, whose name was Kellen, accepted the challenge and said they would start with basic combat to see what humans could do without their crystal enhancements. What followed was beautiful chaos as the humans fought, with a style that made no sense to the elves, combining military training with street fighting and pure improvisation. Roger somehow turned a defensive exercise into an assault, while Amy used her medical knowledge to find pressure points, and Tyler built traps from training equipment. Luna watched with her dragons and told Jake this was why humans confused other species, because they turned everything into a weapon, including things that were not supposed to be weapons. The Void Seeker simulation was next, and Jake watched his team face a holographic version of the creature, while the elves expected them to run when it appeared. Instead, Maria flew her training fighter directly into its mouth, while firing everything she had, and Roger jumped on its back trying to find a weak spot. Amy started analyzing its movements, looking for patterns, while Tyler began rewiring the simulation room to increase power to their weapons without asking permission. The elves stood shocked while Luna laughed, and her dragons mimicked human war cries they had learned, which sounded hilarious coming from creatures that breathed fire. Kellen admitted he had never seen anyone fight like that, with no regard for proper form or established tactics, just pure, aggressive problem-solving. Over the next weeks, the training intensified, with the humans learning to use their crystals while teaching the elves about human military history and tactics. Jake discovered his crystal gave him the ability to see probability, lines showing him the most likely outcomes of actions, which helped him make tactical decisions. Maria could phase through solid matter for short periods, while Roger could duplicate weapons from energy, and Amy could heal others by transferring their wounds to herself temporarily. Tyler's ability was strangest, as he could make machines work beyond their design limits, turning simple devices into impossibly effective tools. The elves began to respect them, especially after Maria challenged Kellen to a race through an asteroid field and won by flying through asteroids instead of around them. Luna spent evenings with Jake teaching him about the Void Seekers and how they consumed entire dimensions, leaving nothing but empty space behind. She also taught him about her people and their long history of watching younger races rise and fall, while never interfering until now. Jake asked why they were acting now, and Luna said, because humans had changed the equation by spreading so fast and fighting so hard that even the Void noticed. Her dragons had grown attached to the human team, with the blue one following Maria, while the red preferred Roger, and the green liked to watch Tyler work. One night Luna's father visited to observe training, and watched the humans turn a defensive exercise into a full assault that destroyed half the training room. Instead of anger, he showed approval, and told Jake that his team was ready for their first real mission to a colony under attack. The planet was called Haven, and had been settled by peaceful traders who were now trapped as Void Seekers circled their world, feeding on fear. Jake team loaded onto their new ship, which Luna had named Defiance, and which was armed with both elf technology and human modifications that worried the engineers. Maria took the helm while Roger manned weapons, and Tyler did things to the engine that made it run at 130% capacity. They dropped out of hyperspace to find 3 Void Seekers surrounding Haven while distress calls filled the communication channels. Jake ordered an immediate attack before the elves could suggest a planning session, and Maria dove straight at the largest Void Seeker. Roger fired everything, including weapons. Tyler had added without authorization, while Amy prepared the medical bay for casualties. The Void Seekers turned toward them, surprised that anyone would attack directly, and Jake felt his crystal show him probability lines that shifted with each second. He called out targets based on what he could see, and Luna amplified his commands through her crystal, while her dragons grew to battle size. They punched through the first Void Seeker using concentrated fire, while Maria flew patterns that should have torn the ship apart but somehow held together. The second creature tried to wrap around them, but Tyler had polarized the hull in a way that made the darkness slide off, while Roger kept firing. Jake saw a probability line that showed victory, and ordered Maria to fly directly between the remaining 2 creatures while everyone fired outward. The Void Seekers collided, trying to catch them, and became tangled in each other while the team poured fire into the knot of darkness. Both creatures imploded, and suddenly Haven was free while the colonists sent messages of thanks and disbelief that anyone had come to help. Luna kissed Jake on the bridge in front of everyone and said this was just the beginning, while her dragons sang victory songs. They landed on Haven to help with repairs and were treated like heroes. While children asked to touch their crystals, and adults cried with relief, an elder trader asked Jake why humans would risk themselves for strangers, and Jake said because somebody had to, and humans were too stubborn to know better. That night the team celebrated in a local tavern, where Maria told increasingly impossible stories about the battle, while Roger demonstrated his weapon duplication. Amy healed injured colonists without asking for payment, while Tyler fixed machines that had been broken for years just because he could. Luna sat with Jake watching his team and said humans were teaching the galaxy something important about choosing to fight rather than waiting to die. Jake asked what came next, and Luna showed him a star map with dozens of colonies marked in red, saying the Void Seekers were attacking everywhere. He looked at his team laughing and drinking with aliens they had just saved, and felt that fire in his chest grow stronger. Tomorrow they would move to the next colony and the next battle, but tonight they were heroes, and that was enough. Luna leaned against him while her dragons curled around them and said her father was so impressed he was recruiting more humans for other teams. Jake smiled and said good luck controlling them, and Luna laughed, saying nobody controlled humans. They just pointed them at problems and got out of the way. The crystal mark on his palm glowed with warmth, and Jake knew this was what he was meant to do, even if it scared him every single day. His team started singing an old Earth war song, and the aliens joined in trying to learn the words while Maria taught them to march. Jake watched them and thought about how far he had come from the quiet engineer who followed all the rules to this moment. Luna whispered that her father wanted to meet his team tomorrow, and Jake groaned, knowing they would probably break something expensive. But that was tomorrow, and tonight they were the Void Guard, and they had saved a world, and nothing else mattered. The throne room was packed with representatives from every major species in the galaxy, while Jake stood before Luna Father, trying not to fidget as the ancient elf studied his team. Maria was barely containing her laughter at the formal ceremony, while Roger kept counting the guards, and Tyler was definitely scanning the throne with some device he had built. Amy stood perfectly still, but Jake could see her analyzing everyone's medical condition and making mental notes while the others tried to look professional. The Elf King rose and his voice echoed through the chamber as he announced that the Void Guard had destroyed 17 Void Seekers in just 1 month. Gasps came from the assembled aliens because most species took years to kill, even one while these humans had turned hunting nightmares into a routine. The king continued saying that Jake team had developed tactics no one had imagined, like using Void Seekers' hunger against them, and actually boarding one to plant explosives. That had been Maria's idea, and it had worked, though Jake still had nightmares about being inside a creature made of hungry darkness. Luna stood beside her father in ceremonial robes that made her look like starlight given form, while her dragons sat on perches wearing tiny crowns. The king said that because of their success he was commissioning 50 more human teams and asked Jake to help train them. Before Jake could respond, an alarm rang through the station, and guards rushed in reporting that a massive Void Seeker was approaching. This one was different according to the sensors, ancient and intelligent rather than just hungry, and it was sending a message. The creature appeared on the main screen, a thing of absolute darkness with eyes like dying stars, and when it spoke everyone felt it in their bones. It said it had come to challenge the one who had been killing its children, and if they won the Void, Seekers would retreat for 100 years. Jake felt everyone looking at him and wanted to say this was insane, but Maria stepped forward and said her captain accepted. The Elf King started to object, but Luna touched his arm and said this was a human decision, and they should respect it. Jake team immediately started planning with Roger suggesting they use every weapon they had while Tyler wanted to overload the station reactors. Amy pointed out that would kill everyone, and Maria said they should take the fight to space where they could move freely. The Void Seeker sent coordinates for the battle in empty space between systems and gave them 3 hours to prepare. Luna pulled Jake aside and said he did not have to do this, but Jake said yes he did, because running was not an option anymore. She kissed him deeply, and her dragons wrapped around them, both humming with nervous energy while she whispered to come back alive. The team loaded onto Defiance with more weapons than the ship was designed to carry, while volunteers from Haven and other saved colonies offered support. Jake told them to stay back because this was something his team needed to do alone, though he appreciated their courage. They arrived at the coordinates to find the ancient Void Seeker waiting, a creature so large it had its own gravity field pulling debris into spiral patterns. It spoke again, saying it had existed since before stars burned and had never been defeated by any species. In single combat, Jake asked if it would truly honor the agreement, and the creature said Void Seekers did not lie, because lies were for creatures that feared truth. Maria took the helm while everyone else manned weapons, and Jake felt his crystal burning against his palm, showing probability lines that all led to death. But then he saw something else, a single, golden line that flickered and danced, showing a path that even the crystal said was impossible. He called out orders following that golden line while Maria flew patterns that defied physics, and Roger fired weapons in sequences that made no tactical sense. The Void Seeker laughed to sound like reality tearing and said humans amused it with their chaos, but chaos alone would not save them. It attacked with tentacles of pure void that erased anything they touched while the team dodged and fired, and Tyler pushed the engines past breaking. Amy was keeping everyone functional by constantly healing minor injuries from the gravitational stress while the ship screamed under the pressure. Jake saw the golden line leading straight into the creature mouth and told Maria to fly directly at it while everyone thought he had gone insane. But Maria trusted him and dove straight forward while Roger fired everything, and Tyler dumped all power into forward shields. Inside, the creature was worse than anything Jake had imagined, an infinity of hunger and darkness that tried to erase their existence. But Jake Crystal blazed with light, and he saw what the golden line was showing him. The creature's core, its actual self hidden in layers of void, ordered everyone to fire at specific coordinates that made no sense but created a pattern, and suddenly the darkness started to collapse. The ancient Void Seeker screamed in rage and pain as its form began to unravel, but it managed to speak, saying humans were impossible. Jake grabbed the communication system and said that was the point, that humans did impossible things because they did not know they were impossible. The creature laughed as it died, saying it finally understood why the universe had created humans to be its antibody against the void. They burst out of the dissolving creature, trailing darkness and fire, while the ship fell apart around them, and Tyler said the engines were gone. Maria somehow glided them back to the station, on momentum alone, while Roger kept shooting pieces of void that tried to follow them. They crashed into the docking bay and rolled out of the wreckage while emergency teams rushed to help, and Luna ran to Jake. She threw her arms around him crying and laughing while her dragons grew huge and roared triumph to the entire station. The Elf King himself came to the docking bay and knelt before Jake team saying they had done the impossible and saved the galaxy. Jake helped him up saying they were just humans doing human things, and the king laughed saying that was precisely what made them terrifying. Over the next days, word spread through the galaxy that humans had defeated an ancient void seeker in single combat, and the creatures retreated, as promised. Colonies that had lived in fear for generations celebrated while new volunteers flooded recruitment centers, wanting to join the Void Guard. Jake was given medals from dozen species and promoted to general, but he just wanted to fix ships and spend time with Luna. She said he could not go back to being just an engineer because the galaxy needed him to be the human who grabbed danger and won. Her dragons had claimed his entire team as their humans and spent their time following them around and learning human curse words. Maria was made an admiral and immediately started teaching alien pilots to fly like humans, which mostly involved ignoring safety protocols. Roger became weapons master for the entire Void Guard and developed things that made elf scientists question their understanding of physics. Amy revolutionized battlefield medicine by combining human determination with elf crystal technology, while Tyler just kept building impossible things. The Elf King officially recognized humans as protectors of the galaxy and gave them access to technology that other species had waited millennia to receive. But more importantly, Luna Father gave Jake his blessing to marry his daughter, saying any human crazy enough to fly into an ancient void seeker deserved her. The wedding was attended by thousands while Luna dragons grew to enormous size and provided a light show that could be seen from orbit. Maria was best woman and gave a speech about how Jake had gone from scared engineer to legendary warrior by just saying yes to adventure. Luna wore a dress made of starlight and crystal, while Jake wore armor that Tyler had modified to be unnecessarily dangerous. When they kissed, the assembled crowd cheered in 100 languages while the dragons sang a song that made the station ring like a bell later at the reception. Jake asked Luna if she knew this would happen when she first appeared on his mining ship. She smiled and said she had hoped, but even she had not imagined humans would exceed every expectation and become legends. The party lasted 3 days with humans teaching aliens to dance, while aliens taught humans to drink things that should have been lethal. On the final night, Jake stood with Luna on an observation deck watching the stars while her dragons slept around them. She said the Void Seekers would return eventually. But now the galaxy knew that humans existed, and that changed everything. Jake pulled her close and said, "Let them come because humans would be ready and they would do what humans always did." Luna asked what that was, and Jake smiled, saying they would grab danger with both hands and refuse to let go until they won. She laughed and kissed him while the stars burned bright, and somewhere in the void, ancient creatures reconsidered their plans, because humans had arrived on the galactic stage, and they brought with them something the universe had never seen before. They brought the absolute refusal to accept defeat, and the crazy courage to grab crystal swords and charge into darkness singing. Jake looked at the stars and then at Luna, and thought about how much had changed since that day in the engine room. He had been brave when she asked and grabbed the opportunity, and now he was part of something bigger than he had ever imagined. The crystal mark on his palm glowed with warm light, and Luna dragons stirred in their sleep, mumbling human words they had learned. Tomorrow there would be new challenges and new impossible things to do, but tonight he was with Luna under alien stars, and that was perfect because he had learned that being brave was not about not being afraid, but about grabbing life anyway.